Whoops, it's been a busy couple of days. Right, there we go. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me now. Right, back to the cameras. Sorry about that. Right, there we go. I think they all look okay. Yeah. Now I'm going to try and move this one in a little bit closer. Right, there we go. I think that'll do. I'm just going to check on my tablet just to see what the brightness and the focus is like. I've just got to wait. If you're wondering what this is a focusing mask thing. It's nice and high contrast and stuff, so I can hold it in front of the piece or whatever. Set the cameras onto manual focus, so it focuses on this, and then turn the autofocus off rather. So autofocus on for this, switch the autofocus off, and then the piece should be in beautiful, beautiful sharp focus. $157, wow, that's awesome. I'm going to need some of that. I need those. Going to need the gloves. Well, I've got almost nothing to do now for 20 minutes. I did come up a little bit early this evening to get prepped for it. Rex, thank you very much for those kind words. I'm really enjoying doing them. I've had a few technical problems with my own website, which I'll talk about when there are a few more people here over the last 48 hours, something like that. And but they have been rectified now, and it's nice to be back up at the workshop. Ivor Longwalk website is functional, shall we say. Thank you for asking. I won't go into too much grim and gory detail, but I've got a load of work to do to rebuild it. But it is a very good excuse to actually make it better than it was beforehand. Tom Sloan in Delaware. Wow, hi Tom. Harold Sand, hi Harold. Colin Ball, Philip tell some jokes. I'm not sure any jokes I know would be suitable for a global audience. Phil Romney, you're very welcome Phil, thank you. David Muckle, looking forward to this evening. I'm looking forward to it too, David, and thank you for your pictures that you sent earlier. Hi Matthias. Steve Ash, Martin, have you ever done a partner piece with another YouTuber? Steve, are you talking about a collab where one person does a bit, videos it, and then sends it to me, and I do my bit and video it? Or are you talking about a joint turning, two people turning on the same stream? So Steve Ash, two people on the same stream, or one piece passed between two people? Philip in Tennessee, hello. Ray Shaw. Hi Susie Fisk. Colin French, hello. Colin, can I tell you more about the camera switcher? Yes, Colin. It's called a Stream Deck. It's mainly used by gamers, as far as I can gather. Loads and loads of gamers use these. I've actually upgraded it now to the bigger one, the one with the 15 buttons. There it is. So there's a whole load of stuff that I can do with this. Like the guys who joined us on Tuesday for the Excellence in Finishing course saw this in the bottom left of their screen. And I can also show you the bowl sander in the bottom left hand corner of the screen, bowl gouge, my fluted parting tool, and beading tool, recess tool. So I've programmed the buttons, Colin, to do a whole load of stuff. If you want to know more about it, give me a ring tomorrow, and I'll be very happy to have a chat with you about it. Brian Harper in Scotland, hi Brian. Dave Shorten, learning so much, that's really good to know. Thank you, Dave. Karen Browning, will we be pausing at 8 o'clock for the worker clapping? Yes, we will. John Blackwell, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, USA. Hello, America. Marky Snot, Mississippi. Hello again, Marky. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming back again. Pixie Matlis, black and white test cards with multiple shades of grey, or at least in the US. Pixie, yeah, good. Check this out. I've actually got two. Where is it? There it is. So I use this one here. This one here is just purely for focusing, hence the contrast on the card. But this one here is a grey card. It is 17% grey, and with my normal videos I do my best to set the white balance in the camera to this shade of grey. And that one there is evening. Hi Dewey. It looks like the stream's dropping a little bit. It should settle again in a minute. That is my problem with the internet, that stream dropping. Okay. Ray, yes, I will, just as we get towards the beginning of the demo, so I can blame you if it goes Pete Tong. Thanks very much. Thanks, John. Why have you wood shared? Hi, Andrew. Nick Benson. Hi, Nick. John PBH, hello again. I think John's been on every one of the lives so far, which is great. Right, the stream is a little bit shaky just at the minute. Dewey, yes, I did get your email. Thank you for submitting your pictures. As you've probably seen today, it's been horribly, well, today and yesterday were absolute nightmares. So I have got it, and I will get back to you as soon as I can on that. Carol Baxter, you're a star. Thank you very much, Carol. Adrian Moore, hi Adrian. Steve Boz, hiya. Julian Clifford, hello. Oh, Steve Ash, the same piece passed over. No, I haven't done one of those. Mainly, it's not that I haven't been asked or I haven't asked anybody. It's just I find it very difficult to make normal videos. Live streams are fine because the live streams take about half as long as the filming of a normal video, and I don't have to spend another 6 to 8 hours actually editing the final piece. So doing lives is actually great. But I would consider doing a collaboration like that. Julian Cleek, hope your IT issues are sorted. The majority of them are sorted now, Julian. There's still an awful lot of work to do, but in order to get the site up and running and get people back onto it and stuff like that, that's all sorted, which is great. Stephen Aldred, thank you very much. Really appreciate that, thank you. Colin, Colin French, super chat, bottom right hand corner. Yeah, bottom right hand corner, just below the chat there, Colin. Graham, got my high gloss today and tried it on my first bowl. Fantastic. How did you get on, Graham? Kevin Devine, thank you. Or Devine, Kevin Devine. Martin, any chance of a repeat of Tuesday? I registered but forgot all about it. Kevin, don't panic. Can you send me an email via the website and I will send you the link to watch the recording. David Hall, hi David. Right, got a couple of minutes. Yeah, well, we've got 9 minutes actually. 195, my word. Colin, wow. Colin French, you're a star. Thank you very much. This is better be a good one then. I'm glad I chose this particular blank, because this blank I've got to show you here is just gorgeous. Or it will be when I get some colour on it. At the moment it's fairly boring. Tony Harvey, thank you. Jennifer Staunton, hi Jennifer. Fiona Uzar, which wood turners do you most admire? That's a very good question, Fiona. I admire anybody who actually picks up the tools and uses a lathe to make some stuff out of it. Artistic turner, I love the artistic turners. I mean, Nick Agar's way up there at the top somewhere. Mark Sanger, Phil Irons, hollow forms, and his colouring and his finishing are fantastic. The late Bin Po, his work was gorgeous. Douglas J. Fisher in the western side of Canada, his work is amazing. Reg82, hi. $20, thank you very much. Reg82, is that Regina Shed? Reg82, is that Regina Shed? Jacob Owen, where can I see your email? Jacob, my email address, you can use the contact form on my website, which is msabensmith.com. Stupidly didn't register as I thought it was going live, didn't check the website. No worries, Steve Boz. What I had to do in the end was there were so many people interested and booking onto the course and wanting to see it. In order to make the lesson as good as I possibly could, I decided to make it just purely for the people that had booked on. And it was around that time that I had a massive server error on the website, and it was just all a massive pain. So Steve, if you would like to see it, can you drop me an email and let me know that you want to see it, and I'll send you a link to see the recording. Andy Harris, thank you very much. Terry Sykes, thank you. Twisted Trees, thank you for your email today and the donation as well. I'm glad you got the pack, that it's arrived safe and sound. Daniel from Vancouver, just got Hampshire Sheen embellishing wax sample pack. Fantastic. Brilliant. 217. Oh my word. Not nervous at all now. Lynn, Doug Fisher lives 15 kilometres from you. Wow, I would love to come and have a look around Vancouver, that area. It's been a long 22 years since I was in Vancouver, long before I got into wood turning. Anthony Harvey, just going to do me dinner. Julian Clifford, waiting for Ed to send the Hope Sounder. Hi Regina, how are you? How are you getting on? I guess you made it home safely after you came for your lesson last year now. Adrian, if you didn't book onto the course, I'm gonna leave it for a bit. No, actually, Adrian, if you want to see the Excellence in Finishing course, drop me a line and I'll send you the link. Sorry. Hi James. Erlen Steenberg. Well, 300 kroner. Thank you very much from in Norway. You're an absolute star. Thank you very much. I hope Harold has been looking after you with your Hampshire Sheen stuff. Colin, are you closest? If Silk turns up, Colin, then I think you probably will be. No, if Silk turns up, they're in Basingstoke. Nick Benson, thank you. So Colin, yeah, if Silk turns up in the chat, they are in Basingstoke. Otherwise, I think you will be the closest to me. Denise Fletcher, thank you very much. Yeah, Denise, so long as you keep the link, you'll be able to see it. Oh, Regina, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I had a lovely day with you. Guten Abend, Christoph. Hi, Wayne. Right, okay, we've got 3 minutes to go. I'm just going to go and make sure that I'm comfortable for the start of the demo, and I'll be back very shortly. Right, there we are. I was just hitting the wrong buttons there for a minute. Steve Mitchell, thank you very much. And Graham, thank you very much indeed for your donations. I really appreciate those. I hope you have a fantastic time this evening enjoying this colouring demonstration. Just before we get started, a few points of housekeeping, if that's all right. Firstly, as I'm doing bits and pieces, please hold off on your questions as I can't. I'm reading the questions here, so please wait until I ask for questions before you fire them at me. Otherwise, I will probably not see them. Secondly, the internet here tonight is a little bit patchy, so if it does start to judder, don't worry. I can see on my little screen down there the quality of the stream. There's not much I can do about it, so don't worry about that. And in 25 minutes time, at 5 to 8, we're going to stop or pause the demonstration for 10 minutes to give people here in the UK a chance to head outside into their gardens and stuff and give a really big loud cheer and make loads of noise for our National Health Service and our care workers all over the country who are doing such a fantastic and amazing job at looking after our poorly people who are suffering with the coronavirus. So that will be at 5 to 8. I've got an alarm on my phone, so it'll go off so I don't miss it. So that's why we're going to stop then. And that's kind of it really for the housekeeping, I suppose. Christoph, thank you very much indeed, and James Wessex Technical, thank you too. Right, this evening's demonstration is all about colouring and the technique that I use to create really atmospheric colouring patterns on pieces like this one. And this one I particularly like, this one with the tiger stripes on it, and this bluey purple one. And we'll also have a look at the somewhat fairly advanced wax finishing technique that I'm using quite a lot at the moment and demonstrating particularly in club demos and in store demos. And I also, or at least I used to get criticised quite a lot for applying colour to my work. And well, it's my wood and I'll do what I like with it. But I apply, that noise you might be able to hear in the background is the compressor. The blank I have on the lathe this evening is on a vacuum chuck. So I used to get criticised for applying colour. But then I thought, I don't look at wood in the same way as a lot of other people do. I look at wood much more as a canvas rather than a piece of wood. Artists compose work on a canvas, a cotton canvas. Sculptors use marble and granite and things like that, and they're expressing their creativity, and that's what I do. On wood, I express myself. Artists do that kind of thing. So I like to add colour to wood, and also because if we just have a look at this piece of wood, it's not exactly awe-inspiring. It's a fairly boring looking piece of wood. There's some nice grain figure in it. There's a little bit of spalting happening as well, but on the whole, this being sycamore, it is relatively boring. Let me just move that camera down a little bit. So I like to liven things up a little bit. I live a fairly colourful life, I'm pretty busy, that kind of thing. I'd like to think I've got a fairly bubbly character, that kind of thing, and I like to express that on my work. But what I don't want to do, I don't want to hide the wood, particularly with this colouring technique. If I wanted to hide the wood specifically, what I would do is I would paint it, but I would do it, well, I'll come on to that in a minute. So what I want to do with my colouring technique is show what's in the wood, but in a colourful way. Let me just flick back to that camera. So you might be able to see here we've got some really nice figure. and there's a little bit of spalting going on there as well. By using colour, we can accentuate that and highlight it and make it look really cool, very atmospheric, deep, or as light or as dark as we want to. And that's the technique that I'm going to show you this evening. And it starts, the whole process starts off with colouring the whole piece black. Now, if you joined me on the Saturday demo about a week and a half ago, you would have seen this technique demonstrated. But for those of you who couldn't get to see it on that Saturday, this is what we're going to be looking at. Now, if I just show you this piece here, you can see the ripple in this piece of sycamore here. And you can see that we've essentially got black lines running through it. Now, when we colour the whole piece black, what the black colour is going to do is it's going to be absorbed deeply into the softer parts of the wood and not so deeply in the harder parts of the wood. So if we look around, well, if we look anywhere on here really, now that is quite a good spot. So where you can see the yellows and the reds and the oranges here, that is fairly hard wood, and then next to that we've got a black stripe there. Sorry, the yellow stripes are in the softer parts of the wood. No, it's not. I'm so sorry, I'm getting all confused. The black is going into the softer parts of the wood, and the colours are staying on the harder parts of the wood. Therefore, when we take the majority of that black off, about halfway through the process, you end up with stripes like this. And if we have a look at the bluey purple one, these are all demonstration pieces that I've done at clubs and in store and stuff like that. So there's another piece. You can see the ripple showing up really nicely in there, and round there as well we've got different shades of blue going on in there as well. So by using this particular technique, you can get really cool effects if your blank is showing figure. Now, I like to buy wood in person wherever I can, because what that does is that it enables me to actually have a look through a shelf of wood or a pile of wood and look for the wood that has the figure in it, or even little knots, that kind of thing. And I'm just going to have a quick look. No, I can't see any. Sorry. Yeah, so I look for wood that has the figure in it, the ripple. You know, when you pick up the blank and you turn it in your hands, it seems to glisten and gleam in places. They're the blanks that I like to buy. If I get a blank that is pretty plain and with no figure in it or no knots or anything like that, then the chances are this technique isn't going to work. So if you do have a very plain, boring blank, what I suggest you do is just colour it a single flat colour, maybe two. This particular process uses a lot of different colours, but we'll come on to that in a mo. Now the choice, let me put these down somewhere, put them on the table. Now the choice of colour, I have generally favoured water-based colours. They give me a little bit of extra time to play with the colours and move them around the piece before any solvent in the colour evaporates and essentially locks the colour in position. So by using a water-based colour, it gives me a little bit of extra time to move the colour around the piece before it dries out. I'm not going to worry about the grain being raised, because the first step of this, colouring everything black, will raise the grain, but then we're obviously going to be sanding that. We're going to be sanding that off. Now, unsurprisingly, where are they? Hang on a minute. Sorry, I've got this new gadget here. Is there we are. Unsurprisingly, check that out. Isn't that posh? Unsurprisingly, I am going to be using the Intrinsic Colour Collection tonight, but any water-based stain product will be able to give you this kind of will be able to give you this kind of result. I developed the intrinsic colour collection purely because I wanted a range of colours that were a little bit more subdued, a little bit more mature than colours that I was using before I developed the range. So they're a little bit more muted, they're still quite vibrant, quite rich, as you would have seen from those pieces that I've just shown you, but these are my colours of choice for the moment. So the first thing we need to do is obviously sand our piece down, and I've already done that just to save a little bit of time. So I've sanded this down as perfectly as I possibly can, down to 400 grit. 400 grit is important because at 400 grit there are not really any scratch marks, any sanding marks visible to the eye. Any further than 400 grit, and what tends to happen is that the wood gets hot. So if you go down to 600, the wood gets hot and it actually starts to seal itself, and obviously we want the colours to penetrate the wood. So a wood that has sealed itself is no good, and what will happen is that the colours will smear on the surface rather than be absorbed into the pores of the wood. Everybody up to speed with that? Sorry, there's a lot of information. I'm just going to go blah at you. So I hope you're all managing to keep up, but you can at least come back and watch the recording of this. I've done it again. I nearly took a mouthful of my sanding sealer. Water bottle. Right. Okay, right, so it's already been sanded down to 400 grit, and the colour is going to go onto the bare wood. We're not going to apply any sealer at all just for the moment. No sealer whatsoever until all of the colours have been applied and they are all completely dry. Gloves are very important. These are nitrile gloves. I think they were tattooist gloves. Nice black gloves. I use nitrile gloves in the workshop purely because I feel a bit awkward asking people when they come for lessons if they're allergic to latex. So I use nitrile gloves, and we're going to start by applying black. So we're going to cover the whole thing in black to start with, and I'm going to use kitchen towel. Let's just change the camera. There we go. You can see a bit better there. I use kitchen towel because it's cheap and easily accessible, rather than any kind of cotton cloth or something like that. Because if you get into the habit of using cotton cloth on the lathe, if you happen to spin the lathe up and the cotton cloth gets caught on the piece or something like that, it can lead to fairly nasty accidents. So with the black in hand, I'm going to get plenty of black onto the new squirty bottle. I'm going to get plenty of black onto the towel, and I'm going to wipe it on. I'm going to wipe the black on fairly quickly. Now note there how I said wipe it on. I'm not pushing it in, or I don't want to be pushing the black or any of the colours into the wood, because what that'll do is it'll force it into the pores of the wood, which will then leave sort of a tide mark. And tide marks are very difficult to disguise later. So I'm putting this on quickly and evenly, and with a very thick pad. You see, I think that's 2 pieces of kitchen paper folded into eighths, I think. So we've got a very large, or a very thick pad of paper, which helps to even out the pressure that my hands or my fingers are putting into the piece. And also, if you look at how my hand is positioned on here, my hand or my fingers are actually on the back of the paper, and I'm putting a little bit of pressure through my whole finger, on my fingertips, the pads of my fingers here, rather than my fingertips, and that too will help even out the pressure. So as you can see now, it's getting all black, and I want to make sure it is as evenly covered as possible. It's surprisingly warm in here this evening, I must say. So this these water-based dyes are drying off fairly quickly naturally, which is nice. Not as quick as an alcohol-based colour, of course, but then, as I said earlier, I don't like being dictated to by the speed the alcohol dries. So we'll put a little bit more on. And right, it's nearly 10 to, so I think by the time I finish explaining this bit, we'll do some questions, and then we can all go outside and start shouting for the NHS. How about that? Right, there we go. That's all the black on that I want, and I think if I just turn this round a bit, you can see, let me just dry it as well, that'll help. So I'm going to use a hot air gun just to help dry these colours off. Now as I turn this round, I think you'll be able to see just how the figure is picking up the black colours. So there we go, look at that. This big stripe down here, that's quite a soft piece of wood, but either side we've got a fairly light, a fairly soft area. So we should end up with quite a sharp black line, or a very dark line down the bowl in that position there. And you can see here where we've got all of these lines coming round, that bit there is still a bit wet. Right, so that's the black. Now the next thing we need to do, which I think we will do, yeah, I've got time to do it. Now we need to sand it off, and how much you sand off really depends, well, I think it depends on your mood. If you want a nice bright piece, then obviously sand off most of the black. If you want a dark, moody piece, then don't sand off too much. And I do it generally by my mood. If I'm in a good mood, I'll sand an awful lot off. If I'm in a bad mood, I won't sand very much off at all. And given what's happened over the past couple of days, I'm in a pretty bad mood as it is, so I think we'll leave it. So thank you for watching. No, only kidding, but I do need to sand some of this off, and I just need to dry it as well. Make sure that it's dry. If it's not dry, then it won't sand evenly. So whilst you could do this with a drill if you want to, it's really nice to do this with a bowl sander. A bowl sander like the one that's just in your bottom right corner. These are worth their weight in gold, and if you joined us for the Excellence in Finishing course, on Tuesday that we ran here on YouTube. For those who booked onto it, you saw just the technique, or you saw the technique that I use in order to get the finishes that I do. So with your mask on, always make sure that you wear a mask, you switch your extractor on and your air filter and stuff. I'm going to sand some of that off. Now, I'm fairly sure you can still hear me. It's important that you sand off enough, or rather it's important that you sand it off evenly, otherwise you can end up with stripes running around the piece, and we don't really want stripes running this way. So start the lathe. Oop. And I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to evenly move the tool across the surface and take off as much of that colour as I think I need. And I forgot to mention, excuse me talking like this, I don't want to take the mask off. I forgot to mention, go backwards through the grit. So if you finished at 400, start at 400 and work your way back. I'll explain why in just a second. Okay, let's take a look at that. Now you can see really clearly how the softer part of the wood has kept the black, but the harder parts of the wood have lost it. This knot here is going to be absolutely spectacular. But it hasn't taken off quite enough. Now, if after you've sanded the black off with 400 it hasn't taken off enough, go back down to, if you use 320, go back to 320, but I don't use 320, so I'm going to go back to 240 and see what that does. So here's 240, exactly the same thing again. Move the tool as smoothly as possible across the face or across the surface, all the way out and then all the way back in again. Wow. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more with the 240. That'll do. Right, and now because we've done 240, we need to go back up to 400. And then by the time I've done this, it'll be time to stop or to pause the demonstration. Okay, right. That's that. I'll switch the extractor off and then just take this off so you can hear me a bit better. Oh. There's the alarm to say it's time to pause. Right, so we will stop here, or we will pause the demonstration here, just to give you a chance to go out and show your appreciation for our NHS and the care workers who are doing such an amazing job looking after our sick and ill, and just to say thank you for the amazing job that they're doing. So we'll come back. I will start the demonstration again at about 8:05, and at 8:05 we'll do a Q&A just to give some people some time to get back from being inside. So with 319 people watching, I hope at 8:05 there are still 319 people watching. So for now, please go outside, give our NHS a massive round of applause and make as much noise as you can, and I'll see you shortly. Right, well then, right, we're back. That was quite moving, actually. I'm very lucky to live kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and I don't know, 3/4 of a mile away from the nearest housing estates and stuff like that, and I could hear their cheering. There are people outside banging on pans, and the few cars that go past are beeping their horns as well. It's a really nice show of solidarity. So I think we're going to be living in a very different world when this is all over. Right, so we'll give it a few more minutes just to let some people come back, and in the meantime, big thank you to Dave Shorten, Jim Strummer, Eileen Collins, Dave Andrews and Dave Clark. If you're watching, thank you very much for your super chat donations. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And for our colleagues over in the US, thank you for your patience waiting for that to happen. We're doing it. I think we're doing it every Thursday to thank our National Health Service and our health workers for the sterling, brave and dangerous work that they're doing, looking after our sick who are suffering from the coronavirus. So there we are. Thank you. Right, let's do a few questions. So fire away with a few questions, and I'll answer some before we crack on with the rest of the colouring. Okay, Paul Kavanagh, why do you go backwards through the grits? Paul, that's a really good question. If you look here, when it's all black, if I was to go right the way back to the 120 that I started with, most of the colour is going to be taken off of there, and what I want to be able to control the amount of colour that comes off. So by starting at the bottom, so starting at 400 like I did, it'll take off a little bit, and then by doing it again might take off a little bit more. Then by dropping back to 320 or 240, it will take it off a little bit more after that. And I'm just going to have a little play with the camera here, just to see if I can improve the exposure a little bit, because it is very bright. Let me just turn that auto exposure off. Ah, come on. Excuse me while I do this. That's better, I think. Yeah, I think that's a bit better. I hope it is anyway. It's very difficult with you using webcams that although they've got exposure control, the exposure control isn't that great. But looking at my monitor screen, I can see that that's good. Right, so Paul, I hope that answers your question. You go backwards through the grit because it gives you a really fine control over the amount of colour that you take off. Dave Andrews, can you give your good lady a big hug from me, and thank her for the work that she's been doing. She must be absolutely exhausted. David Hall, maple would be a fantastic wood to use. I'm fairly certain this is sycamore, but maple and sycamore come from the same sort of genus of trees. They're Acer something or other, if I remember correctly. So sycamore and maple are absolutely gorgeous. Ash also shows some absolutely gorgeous figure, and well, any wood does if it's got some shake in it, or a knot or a crotch area, something like that. Any wood, but for this particular technique, pale woods, sycamore, maple, ash, chestnut to a degree, all work really well. JJ Martin, is there any wood you have found does not take colour well? I've just tried it on a piece of yew and it was not a success. JJ, I love colouring yew. It is difficult to colour because it is so tightly grained, but it's not impossible. And one thing you need to remember is that when you mix two colours together, so if you mix yellow and blue together, they make green. So if your wood is a yellow colour, let's take Iroko as an example. Thank you, Silk. If we take Iroko as an example, when it's cut, it's a gorgeous yellow colour. If you then try and put a blue dye or a stain over the top of it, the yellow and the blue are going to make a resulting colour of green. So with you, rather than trying to colour it different colours, why not think about enhancing the colours that are already there? So if you've got some of the gorgeous orange that shows in yew wood quite regularly, enhance that with a similar colour, say a red or an orange colour or a yellow, and to see what you can do with that. And where you've got the white bits, try green in there, something like that. So remember, the base colour of the wood will change the colour of the dye that you put over the top of it. Ivor Longwalk, any preference for paper towels, or do you use cheap as chip stuff? Ivor, that's a good question. I do use cheap as chip stuff. Let me show you. I don't mind plugging this brand. I'm not sponsored by them. In fact, I'm not sponsored by anybody other than my own company. These here, Nikki Talent. I really like these towels. They do absorb a little bit, which is the idea because it's a towel. They're pretty cheap and they hold together fairly well. So Nikki Talent, I get these off eBay. I pay about 70 quid for no, I don't. What did I pay last time? I think it's about 40 quid for 100 rolls. So that's pretty cheap, I think. Right, Thomas, do you have to worry about colour bleeding to the inside of the bowl? That's a very good question, Thomas. No, I don't need to worry about the colour bleeding through. The dyes only penetrate the wood up to, I don't know, maybe 0.5 millimetre to 1 millimetre, depending upon how thick the wood is. But you do, particularly with maple and sycamore, of course, but if you're using a wood like ash or oak, where you've got the pores running through, occasionally it can bleed if your wall is really thin, but most of the time you don't need to worry about it. And if you are worried about it and you are turning something very thin, then put some sealer on it. Just a little bit of thinned sealer, not very much, perhaps just a single coat, just to help prevent any bleed through. Twisted trees, yes. I'm not going to go into that story again because I think quite a few of you saw that on Tuesday, but I don't use oh, actually, yes, I will go through it. My sanding regime is there we go. My normal sanding regime in the bottom right hand corner of your screen is 120, 180, 240 and then 400. A general rule of thumb is when sanding, you don't go up more than twice the number that you've just used. So 120, don't go up any higher than 240, and then 240, don't go up any higher than 480. But if it's too close to the edge, what I find is that the next number up doesn't do quite as good a job. So from 120 to 180, that's a good distance. 180 to 240, that's a good distance. 240 to 320, it's okay, but 240 to 400 I find is absolutely perfect. And with a decent technique, I don't think you actually need to use 320 grit, particularly on bowls, and particularly if you're using a bowl sander, one of these, if you've got a decent technique. I do use 320 on spindles because I'm using my hand, my hand and my fingers a lot more, but for the majority of the time on bowls I don't use 320 for that particular reason. And I developed my technique because, as Twisted Tree said, when I first started turning, the shop I went to didn't have any 320 in stock. So because they didn't have any in stock, over a little bit of time I developed a technique where I didn't even need to use 320. There you go. Nicholas, I'm going to answer one more question, or maybe two. Nicholas, can you use the colouring technique when CA glues have been used on the piece? Nicholas, that's very tricky to do, because obviously the CA glue, particularly thin CA glue, is going to sink quite deeply into the wood on either side of the crack or the split that you've just repaired. So what you ideally need to do is sand off or cut back the wood, or cut, if it's a bowl for example, cut back, oh hang on, there we go, that's it, cut back the area, or cut back the whole bowl, so you don't have any of that bleed out that you can see from the CA glue. But that's a really good question. That's a really good question. 99 Clive Gouger, turned a bowl, 99% was smooth, 1% was still slightly rough. What causes this? Very difficult to tell, Clive, without actually seeing the piece, but I would very happily place a bet that your end grain, it's your end grain that is still a little bit rough. Particularly is if it was spalted, that's going to be a problem as well, but it will be the end grain most likely that are causing your little rough patches. So to get over that, make sure you're using a really sharp gouge or really sharp tool, and take very light cuts just to trim those off a little bit, and really work on good tool presentation, and that'll help you a lot. Brian Newton, do you mix the dyes with denatured alcohol, or is that straight from the bottle? Brian, these are water-based dyes, so there's no need to use any denatured alcohol with them at all, and you can use them straight from the bottle, straight onto a piece of towel, a rag, a brush, through an airbrush or something like that. It doesn't matter. These you can use straight from the bottle, and if you want to thin them out a little bit, just add a bit of water. John Minerich, thank you very much indeed, you're a star. And Harold Sand in Norway, wow, thank you very much indeed. Woodsmithery, Martin, in Tuesday's vid, did you talk about the technique behind the inertia sander? I've just made one from a ProCraft kit. Woodsmithery, yes I did. I went into a lot of detail about how I use the inertia sander on bowls, both on the inside and the outside of them. Steve Ash, would food colours be good if you want a food safe finish? Steve, I've never used them. I see people having trouble with them. They're quite concentrated, so you'll have to water them down somehow, but there's no reason why you couldn't try it, in all fairness. In fact I did use food colouring a long time ago when I just started turning. I did use food colouring on a couple of pieces. Didn't like it very much, so I changed. Right, okay, let's crack on, shall we? I could spend all night answering your questions, and although I would love to spend all night answering your questions, my wife is my wife would like to see me. She's barely seen me for the last 2 days because of the computer problems I had with the website. Okay, let's refresh our memory on what the piece looks like. It looks like this. Now, one thing I must say is the piece is going to look fairly rubbish right up until the end. You can see that this colour has dried off now, and it looks really manky and patchy. Don't worry about that. Using this technique, you've got to have a little bit of faith in yourself, and you've got to have faith in the colours and the technique, because I've got in my head how this is going to look, and I'm excited to do it. So what we'll do is I'm going to spend just a minute or two talking about colours. I'm going to, when we went outside to do the clappy thing for the NHS, there was a gorgeous sunset. here I can see some really gorgeous reds and oranges in the sky. So I thought I would use the reds and oranges and the yellow from the colour range. And with this little set, there's ruby, burnt orange, black, flame and honey in there, in the collection I call Fiery Sunset. Now if you're not sure on how colours blend together, I've put together a cheat sheet and a colour wheel for you. I've designed this. You can download it. Oh, you can't download it off my website at the moment because my website is under construction. But if you go to hampshiresheen.com, you can find it there under free stuff. You can download that one, which is a colour wheel that I designed using the shades specifically from the range of colours that I'm using. And there are 2 PDFs in that one. So there's that, and then there's that one there, which gives you three collections of blending ideas. On the left there is Fiery Sunset, in the middle is Sumptuous Night, and on the end on the right hand side is a little collection called Rich Earth, and underneath it gives you the colours from the collection that you need. So if you're not sure about colour, you can download those completely free from the Hampshire Sheen website, and when mine's working again properly, you'll be able to download them for free from mine. So we're going to look at using really nice, lovely, warm colours for this. And I'll just get them off the shelf. So there's Ruby and Flame, Burnt Orange and Honey. Now keep an eye on keep an eye on the honey, because we'll be using that right at the end. So let's get back to our piece. Put more gloves on. So let's just take a second just to refresh our memories on what we've done. The piece was sanded beautifully down to 400. Oh, they're all stuck together. The piece was sanded beautifully down to 400 grit. So there's no tear out, there's no tool marks, and there's no sanding marks left visible to the naked eye. It was then covered in black dye to soak into the softer parts of the wood and the softer parts of the figure, and then it was sanded back to a level that I thought looked nice, frankly. And I think this looks nice. It does look a little bit funny with the black on it, but honestly, don't worry about that. And now for this particular technique, I don't care where I put the colours. The colour positioning really doesn't worry me at all, because I'm not trying to highlight anything at this point. I don't want to highlight this piece particularly, this gorgeous knot area. Not worried about that for the moment. All I want to do is get the colours on nicely and evenly so they all blend together, so they're almost kind of cloudy. And where we've got the black on here, the colours that you put over the top are obviously going to be darker. So if I put a ruby red on here, which is quite a dark red in itself, when it goes over the black, it's going to turn a really deep, rich, almost dry blood red. It's lovely. And then the flame, which is quite a bright orange, that goes over the black. That becomes a slightly more, well, obviously a slightly darker orange. So by putting the black in, we've got lots of different sort of shades of black. It looks like they're turning sort of grey, that kind of thing. And then where we've got some heavy black, well down here and up here, it'll just, I can't say that it shines through the red, can I? No, I can't, whatever, you know what I mean. It will be there, and it will be a really nice, gorgeous, contrasty piece. So I'll start with ruby, and I am going to start with the ruby on the knot, because I've got something special in mind for that. So I'm putting the colour onto, let's just move that control panel. So I'm putting the colour on the towel, and just as I did before, I'm going to wipe that colour on. And you can see how gorgeous that red is. Now the trick to getting a really nice hand blended colour is to feather the edges. A lot of people ask me how I get such a gorgeous, so there's me blowing my own trumpet. A lot of people ask me how I manage to get such finely blended colours like these by doing it by hand, and the key to it is a feather. So I'm starting in the middle of the colour that I'm applying, and then out towards the edges I'm just feathering it down. Can you see that? I'm just feathering the colour back into the wood. And then with another piece of kitchen towel, I'm going to do a bit of flame. Let's do a little bit of flame. Again, I'm putting some on the towel, and I'm going to start away from the colour that I've just added. So I'm going to start over here, and then I can feather it back in to the colour that I've just added. Therefore, it will give us a really nice blend across the two colours. So there's the flame going on, and then I can feather that over the top. Again, look how I'm holding the towel. I'm applying it with the pads of my fingers rather than my fingertips. So there we go, and we've got a feather over here as well, and you can see that that's nicely blended in between those two. And this is only the first coat of two that we're going to put on here. But one thing I definitely don't want to be doing is producing a blocky, I don't want a blocky colours. So I've got a big block of red here and a big block of orange here, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go back to the ruby for a minute, get a little bit of colour on the towel, and put a bit there, bit round the top, maybe something like that. So that gives us another colour that the overcoat colours can blend with. So I've done a bit of flame already, so now we'll move on to burnt orange. I hope you're all keeping up with this. 376 people, wow. Thank you for watching, everybody. Unbelievable. Right, burnt orange next. Get some of that on the towel. So I'm going to start away from the flame that we've already put on. And then apply some burnt orange. So you can see how the burnt orange, where it comes over the top of the flame, is blending nicely. Where it's coming over the top of the black, it's blending nicely too. And over the top of the ruby, we put ruby here and ruby here. That's blended in nicely and created for us yet another colour and another shade. So I'm going to put a little bit more. I'm going to put a little bit more flame in here, I think. I don't know why. This is just sort of how I feel. The colours should go. I think this is about the third time I've coloured this bowl. It's a former demo piece, and because the figure is so good and so nice in this piece, it really works as a piece to demonstrate how effective this particular technique can be on nice timber. Put a little bit more on. It's really rich. I hope that looks okay on your screens. I'll take a picture of it at the end anyway. And then, so that was flame there. We'll now put a little bit of burnt orange in at the top here. I think that was burnt orange. Yeah. Right, so you can see down the side here where we've got these sort of tiger stripes, and this area here around the knot, and we've got a really interesting area going on around here as well. Fab! Right, so that's the first coat done. That needs to dry before we go and put the second coat on. So this first coat has been absorbed into the wood as much as it possibly can, and when it's dry it will be locked and it will stay there. You can reactivate it if you want to with a spray of methylated spirits, and for those of you in the States, methylated spirits is denatured alcohol. This is our methylated spirits or denatured alcohol. We get it from hardware stores and stuff like that, and it's purple. The government insist on adding purple to it and a really, really, really nasty taste, so people aren't tempted to buy it and drink it. Right, let's just have a little mouthful of water. Right, so let's I can just see some chat going on here about water-based dyes, so let me just go over the reasons why I use water-based dyes again. It's because water doesn't evaporate as quickly as alcohol or a solvent-based dye, and what it does is that it gives you a little bit more time just to move the colour around the piece to where you want it. So you don't have to rush as quickly as you would do if you were using an alcohol-based dye or stain. So you've just got a little bit of time, a little bit of extra time to move the colours around before it all starts to sort of dry off. And that way you don't have to rush it. You've got that extra bit of time to think and to, well, play with it really. So I'll just dry those off a little bit with a hot air gun. So remember, this is just the first coat that we've put on here. Now I'm just looking at this knotty bit here. I can see some absolutely amazing grain and figure in here. I hope you can too. It is just gorgeous. Now I'm going to do something now that I normally do on the next step but one. So I'm going to throw this one in just as a little bit of a curveball to say that this is something that I do normally but not at this stage. I'm doing it at this stage because, well, two reasons even. One, I want to see what it looks like, and two, I think it's going to look absolutely stunning. So here is the last grit that I used, which was 400. Now I'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to that stage, but we've got some absolutely amazing sort of ripples up around here, and I want to see if I can get a slightly lighter colour up around here. So if I just sand that back lightly, I'll talk about this particular technique when we get to it in the normal course of events. So I'm just going to sand that back lightly. I don't want to take too much off at this stage. I just want to be able to sort of highlight this area. Take the dust off. Whoops. Take the dust off before you go applying more colour. And I'm going to find the flame, because the flame is quite a bright orange. I'm just going to put that over the top lightly. I'm going to try and leave this bit here the ruby colour. Again, I'm using the pads of my fingers to apply the colour. Let's just take a little bit more off. And we can put some more flame in there. How's the chat going? Because I'm concentrating over here, I can't really see what's going on in the chat, but I hope you're all having a good time. I hope you're enjoying this evening's demonstration. I am. It's nice to be in the workshop. Right, I'll just dry that off as well. Right, that should all be completely dry now. So now we're going to go with the second coat. So before I interrupted myself with that extra little step just thrown in there, the first coat has gone into the wood and it has penetrated as deep as it possibly can. It doesn't go in too deeply, so just following on from the question earlier about bleed through, it doesn't go in too deeply. But as you can see, although the colours here look really good, we can make them look even better by applying a second coat. So I'm going to try roughly to go over like for like. So that was a bit of flame there and a bit of burnt orange, a bit more flame there and ruby here. So I'm going to go roughly over the same place, just roughly. I don't mind if they blend over the top. That's the wrong colour. So I'll start with flame. So I'll put that on over the top, and you might be able to see, or at least I hope you can see, just how vibrant that colour has now become. Right, so that'll do. That was burnt orange there, wasn't it? So I'll pick up the burnt orange next. Don't forget, if you're not sure how these colours work, you can download the free colour wheels from, well, it's actually the Hampshire Sheen website, because my website is currently in a state of disrepair. I'm working on it really hard to get it sorted though. So you can download that, and if you are using the embellishing waxes as well, you can download a cheat sheet where you can cross-refer the colour that you're using with the particular wax that you're using. Right, where was I? What am I doing here? I can't remember what colour that was. Let's do burnt orange again. It doesn't really matter. So I'll put a little bit of burnt orange on there, and then a little bit of ruby as well. I like to use spray caps on my bottles because, as you've seen from my demonstrations, I can be quite animated at times, and not everybody puts the caps back on a bottle when they're using it or after they've used it. So spray caps help for quick and easy application of the colour onto the towel. Cool, look at that. Yeah, quick and easy application onto the towel, and also if you do happen to knock it off the workbench, you're not going to spill it. Right, and then finally a little bit more ruby going on over the top over here, if I do pick up the ruby and not a different colour. So I'm going round the bit, well, vaguely round the bit. Okay, Okay, that'll do. Wow, that is really vivid. Really vivid, wow. I can't wait to get this piece finished, it's going to look fab. Right, how's that looking on the screen? That is quite vivid on your screens there, I think. Okay, right. So that there now is both coats done. So with both coats done, it's time to have a cup of coffee and wait for it to dry. Or you can do what I'm going to do, which is give it a little going over with a hot air gun before we move on to the next step. It's important that you dry it off after each colour application, because that gives you a chance to see how even the colours are. Good heavens, 411 people, that's insane. 418, my word. Thank you everybody for watching this evening. Wow, blown away. Absolutely blown away by that, thank you. Okay, right. Now the bit I was telling you about. I've dried it off and we've still got this knot here. Now we can really make something of that knot, and also this other figure too. You might be able to see that going round as I turn the piece. So we've got some absolutely stunning figure to be playing with, which is where the honey comes in. So I haven't used the honey yet. So far what we've done with this is we have used black as the background, sanded most of that off, ruby, burnt orange and flame, but we're yet to use the honey. So with the bit of 400 grit paper, remember we sanded a little bit back a few minutes ago, that's what we need to be doing next on our piece. So the main colouring has not been targeted towards highlighting anything in particular, that's what this step is for. So there's the knot, there's the sound, there's the paper, and I'm holding it between my thumb and forefinger. Let's just change camera, there we go. I'm holding it between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going to, sorry, that's not my thumb and forefinger, is it? That's my ring finger and my index finger. So I'm getting my fingers all mixed up. And it's wrapped around my middle finger. So I've got essentially my middle finger has become a sanding pad. It's quite soft. And I'm just going over that area there to rub off some of the colour that we've applied. Thank you Mark Wallington. So I'm just going over the colour in the area of the figure that I want to highlight. You see that coming off there? So I'm just moving that round. And then there's so much figure here. This is going to be absolutely epic when it's finished. So don't worry that it looks a little bit patchy at the minute. Phil Bolter, thank you very much. I'm glad you're enjoying it. 428, my word. Good grief. Right, now can you see, I'm going to check this. You might be able to see the figure just coming round here. I can see it. So I'm going to sand some of this back off here as well, just a bit. It is going to start to look patchy again, and whilst we're sanding this off, but there's nothing to worry about. Remember, as I said earlier, the more faith you have in this technique and the braver you are, the better the result could be when it comes to you having a go. And then here we've got these tiger stripes. We've got these tiger stripes down here. I'm sanding with the line of the figure rather than across it. So actually at this point I'm sanding against the grain. So there we go, you should be able to see that. It's very difficult for me because my monitor screen is different to the screen that you can see, I think, but then that's the joy of computer monitors and stuff, they're always different. So when you're doing this, be very careful not to create a fold. See, I've just, or not a crease. If you make a crease or a corner in your sanding disc, you can actually scratch the piece. So always just roll it over and use a pad of a finger to pull off or to sand off the colour. See, look. Now that is beginning to look really quite patchy. There's another bit of figure over here which I've missed. Gosh, wow. Sorry, I'm getting excited. It's quite fun doing this because I can see in my mind's eye exactly how this is going to come out, and I know at the moment it looks a little bit ropey, but when it gets to the finishing stage it's going to knock your socks off. If you like colouring, that is. If you don't like colouring, I'm sorry. Okay, just around there, that looks good. Where's that no, there it is. Brilliant. Okay, bit of kitchen towel now. We've got to take as much of that dust off as possible. And I must remember this is on a vacuum chuck this evening and not a normal chuck, so... Okay, there we are, and you might be able to see the dust there that's come off it. Now we'll go with the honey. What we'll do with the honey is we'll fold the towel into halves, quarters, eighths, 16ths, 32ths. 32ths, is that it? Is it 32ths or 30 seconds? Whatever it is, I can't say it properly because of my teeth. So we're going to put a little bit of the honey colour onto the towel. Just a bit. I'm just going to wait for it to come out. There we go. So just a little bit, and I'm going to show you the knot first. Just round here. So with a little bit of the kitchen towel, a little bit of colour on the kitchen towel, I can wipe that just over that knot area there, and you should see that go. It looks like it's caught fire. It looks fabulous. So this is what we're doing when we're highlighting. We're just concentrating on the little bits that we've sanded off. So by using a really nice bright colour, we can really make a piece stand out. So let's come round here next to the knot that I did at the very end, and just wipe that on and blend it in a bit. Same down there. I'm reapplying a little bit of colour as we go onto the towel. You can see just how fiery and flame-like that looks. And there was a little bit up here as well, I think. And now we've got these tiger stripes. Ooh. So I'm going to open the towel up a little bit. So the towel is now a little bit wider than it was. A little bit of colour on there. And then I'm going to cover as much of this in one go as I can, just like that. And then blend it all down to the bottom, just as the colour starts to kind of dry off on the towel. There we go. Cool, I like that. Now there's some really interesting figure just over here. I think you can see that. That looks really interesting, so it might be worth having a little play with that as well, just to see if we can bring anything out of it. See, that's what happens when you use 400 grit towel on wet wood. Let's just dry that off a little bit. So I'll just use a different bit of paper, different bit of the paper. Lightly sand that off. Remember to use the pads of your fingers as sort of a sanding pad rather than your fingertips. If you imagine your fingertip being a little bit like a stiletto heel, if you're sanding like that, for example, and you're putting a lot of pressure through your fingertips, that pressure is magnified through your fingertip into the piece and can end up really badly scratching a piece if you're not careful. So use the pads of your fingers and you'll get a much better, a much smoother result. Let's get some of this yellow on there and see what happens. That's interesting. Looks like embers, glowing embers down here. Okay, good. I'm going to dry that off one more time. Or rather, I'm going to dry that off and then I'm going to sand it off again one more time. So just round here at the knot, you might be able to see that the yellow that we've put on there is a little bit on the orangey side. Now that's not too much of a problem really, but is that 400? I hope so. But if we just take the disc again, you see how carefully I'm sanding this back, and just really lightly sand around that kind of fiery looking bit, we can give ourselves a little bit more room to make that really stand out. And the same over here as well. I'm not going to do it all over the piece. Because, well, I don't want to, frankly. It's entirely up to you though. You could do this as many times as you like, but just a few little places just to create a really bright highlight that blends into the other yellow. I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised just how effective that will look. Right, there we go. Dust that off again. Brian, thank you very much, Brian. Why do you not airbrush it on? Brian, that is a fantastic question. That is an absolutely brilliant question, Brian. Why don't I airbrush it? Now, I'm not brilliant with an airbrush, but at the same time, I'm not bad with an airbrush. And I've tried doing this technique with an airbrush, and I can't get it to work. I think the pressure that you put on with your fingers does a better job at getting the dye to penetrate into the wood than an airbrush. An airbrush just kind of goes and puts the colour on. So the colour tends to sit on the surface. Now, although I'm wiping the colours on with a towel, they are penetrating into the wood better than an airbrush will allow me to. So I hope that answers your question, Brian, and thank you very much indeed for your donation too. Top, thank you. Right, now if you have a look at this towel here where we were just using the yellow, you can see that it's been a little bit contaminated with the dust. Although we wiped most of the dust off here, a lot of some of the dust has remained on the piece and contaminated the yellow. So I'm going to use a clean piece of towel. Get a little bit more of the colour, just a little bit, and then just over where I've sanded, just wipe that yellow in again, so we get an even brighter highlight. I hope you can see that. Now that's that bit. Now for when we come round to this, sorry, sticking my fingers up at you, when we come round to this fiery bit here, exactly the same thing again, but I'm using a clean piece of the towel, and then I can put that in there. Good grief. I hope you can see that. And then a little bit more over here. Clean place on the towel again, and then a little bit around there, a little bit down there too. Right, let me just move this camera in a little bit, and I hope you can see how amazing this bit here looks. I'm going to sand that back again. I hope you don't mind, but that really does need to be sanded back again for a third time just to make it look absolutely the bee's knees. So I'll give it a little dry off. Whoop. And then just one last going over. See, the devil's in the detail. The devil is always in the detail when it comes to finishing, or in fact whenever you're doing anything, the devil's in the detail. You can always make something look better if you just spend a little bit more time on it. Oh, right, let me just move the camera in again so you can see this. There we go. That looks just gorgeous. Okay, right. Give that a little dry off. And that's it for the colouring. I hope you like that. Next we need to start thinking about sealing it, because once the colours are on, we need to seal them nicely in place, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. As what's that I hear? Nature's calling. I'll be back. Ooh. Where's the button? There it is. I'll be back shortly. Which button is it? Right, I'm back again. Sorry about that. Right, just put these colours away and then we'll start thinking about sealer. Right, sealer. There's always lots of discussion about sanding sealer. Should you use acrylic sealer? Should you use cellulose? Should you use spray? Should you use wipe-on? There's all manner of different sealers out there. I prefer to use a cellulose-based sanding sealer rather than an acrylic one. Acrylic sanding sealers I find take a little bit of time to dry off, and oddly enough, although I want my colours to dry slowly, I want my sealer and stuff to dry fairly quickly. So I use a cellulose-based sanding sealer. That one, obviously it's Hampshire Sheens because that's what I make, but there are other brands out there as well that do a half decent job, and I decant it into an HDPE bottle like this one, peel the label off the tin and put it on there. It just makes it a little bit easier to access. Now, depending upon who you speak to in the wood turning world, some people will say use sanding sealer neat, don't thin it down, and other people like me say yes, thin it down. And the reason I thin sanding sealer down is because it gives me an extra level of control over the amount of sealer that goes onto the piece. One coat of a full thickness sanding sealer may be too much. Likewise, 2 coats may not be enough, but 3 coats is too much. So by using a thinned down sanding sealer, I can apply just the right amount of sanding sealer to the piece in order to create the level of surface finish, or the level of surface finish that I want in order to put my final finish on over the top. Don't ask me what the ratio is. I'm not going to tell you. I get it. I get that a lot at demonstrations. People ask me what the ratio is, but I'm not going to tell you. That's a trade secret. So a slightly thinned down, or a thinned down. John, thank you very much. Lost my train of thought. Yes, a thinned sealer will give you an extra element of control. So when you are applying it to, there we go. When you are applying it, you can just keep an eye on how much of that sealer is left on the surface before you need to move on. And also you'll find if you use a thinned sealer, you'll need to denib it less as well. Right, okay, couple of sheets of kitchen towel here, and I've folded it kind of into long quarters, and you can get just the same as you can with colour. You can get tide marks with sealer if you don't get it on quickly and evenly. So get plenty on the towel, and then we're going to wipe it on quickly and evenly to avoid any sort of sharp lines where the sealer is starting to dry. Get a little bit more on for this side. So getting it on quick and easy, or quick and evenly rather. Okay, right, and that's it for the first coat. Now you might have noticed there that virtually as soon as the sealer was going onto the piece was just going and sucking it all in. That tells me that this is a thirsty piece of wood and it's going to need more than a couple of coats. Now if I'm going to be really honest and play the devil's advocate here, probably on a piece like this, a standard thickness sealer would probably be doing a really fine job, but my sanding sealer is thinned, so I'm happy to wait. I'm not a production turner. I'm happy to wait for that to dry off before I put another coat on. And it is really important that you let the sealer dry between coats. because if you put one coat of sealer on, leave it for a couple of minutes before it's dry, you put another coat on, leave it a couple of minutes, then put another one on, what happens is inside the wood, in the pores down here, the sealer remains wet and damp with the solvent there, and the top dries. So what will happen is you'll have essentially a piece that feels dry, but underneath it's going to be wet. So when you spin the lathe back up again, the solvent is going to try and leach out, and it will dissolve the finish that you put on the top. So make sure that the sealer is dry before you move on to each step. And also, don't worry if the sealer you're using pulls off some of the colour. It doesn't matter. What we're trying to do with this particular technique is bring out what is in the wood, show the figure off. And if some of the colour is coming off, that's not a problem. All that's doing is pulling it off of the surface, not pulling it out of the wood. So don't worry if some of the colour comes off on the towel. It's not a problem. So I can put another coat of sealer on. This one is a little bit thicker than the first one. And I think you might have seen there just how nicely the grain popped up when I put this on. I am going a little bit quicker than I normally do, so the stuff is kind of splashing around a little bit. So we can see it there on the piece. You can see that it's got some lines in it. Can you see it that way? Not sure. I think that camera, I think this camera's a bit of a better view. So we've got some lines forming in here now, which is good. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for when the sealer starts to smear and dry on the surface. And it's at that point I'm going to be ready to put the final finish on. So I'm going to let that dry for a couple of minutes because that was quite thick. So whilst we're waiting for that to dry, does anybody have any comments? Well, any questions? There are loads of comments, and 413 people watching. I'm blown away by that. So if you're watching, if it's your first time here, thank you very much indeed for joining me. If you're not a subscriber of the channel, just down here somewhere is a little subscribe button. Give that a little click, and you can subscribe to the channel, and give the little bell a click as well, and you'll be given a notification next time I go online with a live like this, and also when I do my normal production videos. These live shows are basically being put on to give people in isolation, well, everybody's at home at the moment, but they're being put on to help people, give them something to do, something to think about, and to demonstrate some techniques and stuff that I do at club demonstrations, which are now pretty much cancelled or postponed until the autumn at the absolute earliest. So little subscribe button is down there somewhere, and if you don't want to subscribe, but please do, you can also sign up to a free mailing list on my website, and 24 hours before I go live I'll send you all the information and the link that you need to click just before the demonstration starts. Wow. Right, questions? Martin, can you use acrylic paints to colour or dye the wood before waxing? Either acrylic paint. Over paints I would be tempted to use a lacquer rather than a wax, and then use maybe a microcrystalline wax over the top of the lacquer to make it feel a little bit less plasticky. That's what I would suggest there. Alistair Clark, is there a specific reason for using a vacuum chuck tonight? Yes, Alistair, there is. The piece I've got on the lathe at the moment, earlier on today, looked like this. Bare in the middle, and coloured on the outside, and I wanted to colour the outside of the bowl, so I vacuum chucked it to hold it in position. And blah, blah, blah. Ian Bennett, do the dyes settle in the bottles if left to stand? Ian, no they don't. They are actually a waterborne, they're something. Little mosquito. No, they don't. Basically, they are a liquid-borne colour. I get them in a very, very, very high concentrated form, and then when we bottle them, I water them down so they don't settle. But if you take a look at this one, let me just put that over here. Change that one. If you see the white here, the white does settle because in the white there is a solid pigment in there. So before you use the white, always give it a good. Oh no! Look at that! No! Just got it all over the piece. Whoops. Right, it's gone. Don't worry. Pixie Matlis, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and it's amazing that you'd rather watch me than Netflix. So top. Thank you very much, Pixie. So the white does settle. Because there is a solid pigment in there which obviously settles. Now if you are wondering about the white, in a couple of weeks time I'm going to be doing a demonstration on using the white with colours, because not a lot of people know how to do it and what the results are like. So I will just try and tell you when that one's going to be. I can't find it at the moment. Could somebody please double check on my website as to when the intrinsic pastel demonstration is going to be, please, so we can tell Ian when that demonstration is going to be. Do the bottles come with a sprayer? Paul, no, they don't. The bottles are just the bottles. The sprayers are separate. James Cassidy, would you say there is a little worth in having an airbrush? Have not used mine for a while, as have been copying your hand method. James, if you've got an airbrush, don't get rid of it. I haven't got rid of mine, and I keep wanting to get onto some projects that I can use the airbrush on, and I actually invested in quite a few stencils to use the airbrush with on top of pieces and round pieces and stuff like that, which would be difficult. It'll be difficult to use those with a hand application method. So if using a stencil, an airbrush is a better way to do it, because it puts a finer coat of colour over the top and less likely to kind of bleed underneath the stencil. Philip Pattinson, just to the right hand side of the chat box there is a little $sign, Philip. If you would like to make a donation, I really appreciate it if you do, and everybody who's donated tonight. I'll go through the list of names at the end just to say a big thank you. Right, Phil Bolter, thank you very much, Phil. The intrinsic pastel colour demonstration is on the 15th of April, which I think is Wednesday night. Can't remember, but it's on an evening anyway, so we'll do that. Martin, I've missed the stream. Will this stream be up to download? Robert, no, you can't download it, and if you can download it, I would rather you didn't. I would rather you just enjoy the stream and the recording from YouTube. But if you've got the link, save the link. It will still be there, and it will be removed from public view in a week's time, and then in a month's time it will be available to view on my website. Ivor, do you find a good market out there for highly finished bowls? Ivor, that's a good question. Yes, but trying to find a market anywhere is very difficult, particularly with expensive pieces. That's probably something for another discussion another time, but there is a market there. You just need to find it. And I do find, or I have found in the past, that coloured, beautifully finished pieces sell better than round and brown. Paul, thank you very much. Right, last question before we move on to the ceiling. In fact, the ceiling. I must be getting tired. I thought ceiling, and I looked up. So I'm going to put another coat of sanding sealer on here. Paul Jarman, what's the difference in scorching the piece black and staining black? Philip, thank you very much. Paul Jarman, to answer your question, what's the difference between scorching and staining? Well, first off, Paul, it's very difficult to successfully scorch sycamore or maple unless you add texture to it. So you're better off, if you're wanting to get into scorching, I would suggest using ash for that. And if I just get this coat of sealer, this coat of sealer on, I will show you the piece I did the other day close up, and you'll be able to see what I mean when I talk about it. Right, leave that there to dry off. And if I find this one and this one. Dave Banks, thank you. Right, turn that off. Right, if I show you this. This is a piece of ash that we did the other day in a live demonstration, and this was scorched. And then it was scorched a couple of times, and then all of the soot was pulled out of it with a brush. It was then sealed. And what the scorching does, Paul, is that it gives you a really gorgeous texture. You can't really see it. Well, you can in the light. You can see the texture there. It becomes a really, really, really tactile piece. You run your hands over it, and you can feel the grain beautifully where it's been scorched. And the same with this piece. This is the piece that featured in the video a few months ago. Very heavily scorched, and where we've got the softer grain here, which I think is the summer growth from memory, where you've got that where it's been burnt out more than the harder winter growth, it becomes really, really tactile. But on pieces like maple and sycamore, you can't get that kind of effect because the grain isn't open enough. There's not enough difference between the winter growth and the summer growth, or the hardwood and the softwood. So basically, in that case, if you were to just stain it or dye it, you would essentially just turn it black, and you wouldn't change the texture. So scorching adds texture, staining, dyeing doesn't. Right, last coat of sealer on here, I think. And I need to let that dry as well. Any other questions while we're going through this? Oh, that's interesting. Duncan says that the intrinsic pastel is on the 17th of May, but Phil said it's on the 15th of April. Tell you what, whoever was asking about that, whoever's asking about the white, if you head over to the website, you can actually see the schedule and find it. Right, Dave Banks, thank you very much. I'm going to leave that for I might put one more coat on because I really don't want to get well, I can't really get it wrong, but one more coat of sealer wouldn't hurt. The Hobbitable, is that Czech krona? Is it krona in the Czech in the Czech Republic? Thank you ever so much. That's amazing. So let's just talk. I think a few people might have joined us this evening since we started. So if you're not sure about colours and how colours work together, you can download these sheets from they're best off downloaded from the Hampshire Sheen website at hampshiresheen.com because I don't have my website up and running properly yet. So you can download these two sheets from the website. Those colour wheels are specific to the range of shades in this collection of colours, So they're absolutely useless for any other range of colours out there, only the intrinsic range. Right, let's just have a look back at the piece here, and we'll put one more coat of sealer on. Yeah, this is definitely going to be the last coat, because that's not being absorbed into the wood now. So that's going to be the last coat. Put that away. We'll fix the lights. Ivor, Simon, I hope will be happy with. Oh, you just bought a bolt out. No, well done, Ivor. Tell him I sent you. Regina, do you keep applying sealer until the end grain stops sucking it up? But I'll explain why in a minute. "15th of April, it's a Wednesday night. Okay, doke. So if you want to learn how to use the intrinsic colours but turn them pastel, then 15th of April, Wednesday 15th of April, demo starts at 7:30 as per usual, and we'll have a look and we'll have a little bit of a play turning the intrinsic colours into purple. Why did I do that when I can just do that? Right, let's have a look. Any other questions? How can you tell then you have used enough sealer? Good question, Martin. I will come on to that in a mo. Just clean the dust off the camera lenses. I want to let that dry off just a little bit more. But let's take another look here. Right, we can see the piece now, and it's looking a little bit patchy. That's good. I'm happy that it's patchy, and if I look carefully, I can see some kind of wipe stripe marks on there where the sealer's gone on, and that tells me that there's enough sealer on the piece now, that the sealer is actually beginning to cover the whole piece rather than being absorbed in. So I'm looking, and as soon as I see it starting to smear on the surface, just lightly, then I know that this piece is good to go ahead and put the final finish on. Now we're going to look at a gloss finish tonight with a wax, and we'll be applying it with a mixture of a towel and a hot air gun. If you join me, if you have seen me demonstrate at any clubs over the last few months, or even at any store demonstrations, then you may well have seen this technique being demonstrated in person. But obviously the more people I can show on YouTube, the better. So that's cool. So we're going to use the Hampshire Sheen High Gloss product, which is there. I'm not used to this. I want to point that way, but it's not. It's that way. So we're going to use the gloss product for this. It's food contact and toy safe, if it is in the tin that you can see there. Super hard wearing, nice and easy to apply, tough as old boots, and really, really shiny. But before we do that, I need to make sure that sealer's dry. Remember what I said about the sealer being dry? If there's any solvent left on there, what will happen is it will dissolve, or start to dissolve, or spoil the finish that you put over the top of it. So really important that we let that sealer dry completely, which that pretty much is. What I'll do is I'll just give it a little bit of a hand to dry off. I'm going to put my glasses on for this. I don't normally do this, but I find it can be quite helpful. So just with a bit of kitchen towel, just going to apply a little bit of pressure Thank you, Anthony. So I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure just to help dry that off, and this also helps to denib it a little bit as well. But I'll do some denibbing in a minute with some shavings. Right, so that's dried that off, and you can see too that the surface now is beginning to shine up a little bit, but it's really patchy. That's good. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to pick up some shavings. Oh dear, they're down here on the floor somewhere. Oh dear, excuse me. So I've got some shavings, and I'm going to keep them in the palm of my hand and just denib that sealer carefully. I can't put too much pressure in here because I am on a vacuum chuck. So the shavings, make sure the shavings are from the same piece of wood, I find, or at least the same species of wood, because you don't want to be using oak or ash to denib something like sycamore. Because sycamore, although it's a hardwood, it is actually a little bit soft. Now I left a little bit of sealer on the surface. It's just a little bit hard. So where did I put my Scotch Brite pad? The other thing you can use to denib your sanding sealer is a Scotch Brite pad. He said, looking for it everywhere. Can't find it at the moment. I had it the other day, and I haven't got another one. Oh well. So what I'll do in that case is, if you leave the sealer on the surface a little bit and you don't wipe it on properly, sorry, if you don't wipe it off or spread it out evenly. Ian Bennett, thank you very much. I hope you're enjoying this evening. So if you put the sealer on and you don't sort of rub it in properly, or it's you leave it too thick on the surface, this can happen where you get that sort of pock marking. It's not pock marking, but it's just where it's dry. So just with a very light touch with the 400 paper, just take the top off it. Anywhere where you've got some bits where you've left it on the surface, that's not dry. I'm being very, very careful here about making sure it's dry, because the final finish is probably the most important step of the piece. Because remember when your piece comes off the lathe, it's your final finish that's going to be seen and enjoyed by people in your by your friends, your family, and if you sell it, your customer. So make sure that this final step before your final finish is as good as it possibly can be. That is so important. So all I'm doing here is I'm just taking the very top of the sealer off. I'm putting on barely any pressure at all. Oh, you can't see. Try that. There you go. So barely any pressure at all on there. Just a little bit more around there as well. That'll do. And now I'm going to take that dust off as much as possible. because when we put the wax on, of course, the wax will seal that dust in, so make sure it's clean. Now, as I said before, I know this is looking patchy, and that's exactly what I want, because right now, that'll be okay. Right now I'm going to start putting the wax on. Now, to start with, I want to put on a single coat fairly lightly, so this kind of becomes the undercoat, or the base coat. So remember, I'm using a gloss wax here, very hard wearing. There's no beeswax in here at all, so the actual product is stiffer than you might be used to using. And I'm wiping that on all over. Okay. Right, and I'm going to let that dry off a bit as I'm rubbing it in. So by rubbing it round like this, you make sure that it is on as evenly as it possibly can be. Cool. Right. And then what I'll do is I'll buff that, just that one coat up. Sorry, I'll just buff that up. Whoop. Oh dear. Knocked my drill over. I'll just buff that up a little bit. Now remember, a buff is a polish, it's not a burnish. Right, so I'll leave that just like that there. So that's come up quite nicely for a first coat. And now I'm going to put on a fairly thick coat of the wax. Now this thick coat needs to be on as even as it possibly can be, so keep spreading it around a bit to make sure that it is evenly applied. Mind your fingernails and your thumbnails. You see, again, I'm using the pads of my fingers to apply this rather than my fingertips. Fingertips will scratch the wood, or fingernails if you've got your hand like this, your fingernails can scratch the wood even through the towel. So remember to use the pads of your fingers. And just underneath, I've tucked my thumb just underneath, just in there, so my thumbnail's out the way as much as possible too. And then we can get out the hot air gun. Now this is a hot air gun. You might be able to do this with a hairdryer. I've not tried it with a hairdryer, but because there's no beeswax in this product, you need to be able to get the wax up to 80 odd degrees Celsius, which is very hot Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. Sorry for the people watching in the States. You need to be able to get this hot enough to just melt the wax. If you melt it too much, what will happen is that it will sort of instantly boil, and then it will blister and become rock hard. So this technique, we're just going to sort of blanch, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but we're just going to wave the gun over the surface of the wax until it just melts, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. So wait for it to get up to temperature, and I'm going to crouch down because I want to get the top part in the light where I can see it. There it goes. Okay, and that's it for that coat. So you can see there that it's beginning. It was melting over the surface and kind of smoothing itself out a little bit. And also, Regina, you over there in the States, if you haven't applied enough sealer, let me just pull that down a little bit. If you haven't applied enough sealer, what this technique will do is that it will melt the wax into the wood and also help to seal it as well. And let that cool off a little bit, and we're going to do it again. So same process. Now there's a little bit of heat left in the piece from the first going over with the hot air gun. So whilst that will help soften the wax a little bit for this coat, you've got to move fairly quickly because the heat in there will evaporate the solvent quite quickly. Right, and then we'll do it again. Brilliant. So over successive coats of this particular method, what we're doing is we're building up quite a shell of wax over the piece. When it's done, it feels really lovely. There's a really nice natural feel to it. It feels nice and smooth but still shiny, whereas a lacquer finish can feel, or a wipe on poly can feel a little bit on the plastic side, plasticky, coated in plastic rather than feeling natural. Which is where this particular method I think works really nicely, because it's a really super glossy finish. It's hard wearing and it's much easier to repair as well than if you were to scratch some lacquer or a wipe on poly. Okay, right, I'm going to give this a little buff up and then we'll go with some of the final coats. I don't want to spin it up too fast because remember I am on a vacuum chuck. So I'm just going to put a little bit of just a little bit more than finger pressure on there, just to polish that surface up. There you go. That looks quite nice, doesn't it? Yeah, that's quite nice, that. Okay, it's cool again now, so I will put one final coat on. I think the most I've done is 6 coats, but obviously not in a demonstration. Right, so there's that last coat there, making sure that's definitely on nice and even. Super. Right, this last coat I'm just making sure that the whole surface is now matte with the wax and it's flat, so there's no shine left shining through, and we're going to leave that to dry off just for a couple of minutes. So whilst we're waiting for that, does anybody have any questions? Now that's a shine and no even finished. Not even finished. Yeah, it's very nearly finished. Graham Taylor up there in Scotland, not far from Aberdeen, I think. Mark Wallington, what have you been chatting about? Tried your heat method for wax, but it turned out patchy and it wasn't grain related. I will bet you anything you like it probably was, Mark, even though it may not be the end grain. If it was figured, you'll find that the figure will also absorb a lot of the wax there, and a lot of the sealer as well. But quite possibly there wasn't an even coating of wax over the top as well. Or Mark, send me some pictures via email. I think you've got my email address, so send over some pictures and I'll have a look. Can you use the microcrystalline in the same way? That's a good question, Colin. I'm not 100% certain you can use the microcrystalline wax in the same way. There is microcrystalline wax in here anyway. But I think, well, actually, Colin, I'm not going to try and blag it. I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. You probably could. Canuba wax and microcrystalline wax have a similar melting point, so there's no reason why it shouldn't work, actually, to be honest. Paul Straker, what about the middle? What, this bit? This is the tenon. So when it's reverse mounted, on the tenon there, Paul, I can then do the inside of the piece with the tenon, and then at the end reverse mount the piece, turn the tenon off, and then do some little decorating on the bottom and put in my maker's mark as well. Des Banks, I showed you that method at Harrogate. Brilliant. I'm glad you're using it, Des. Harvey, I have a tin of high gloss that shows cracking. Can it be rejuvenated? Harvey, that's a good question. I would not recommend rejuvenating. Excuse me a second. Oh, sorry about that. I've done it again. Harvey, yes. I would not recommend rejuvenating any wax at all, because all that's happening is the solvent is evaporating. What it leaves behind is a slightly crystalline product that it's just pure wax. There's no solvent in there at all, and you'll find that it is slightly crystalline. If you try and rejuvenate it with some heat, what you'll actually do is evaporate even more of the solvent. Even though it will be soft for a little while, if you start using heat, you will evaporate even more of the solvent out of the product. So when it then cools off again, you're going to have an even more solid product. So I would not recommend trying to rejuvenate it at all. Just use the product exactly as it is in the tin, and honestly you will get an absolutely amazing finish off that product. The only thing that's missing is the solvent, and the resulting or the remaining product is actually quite crystalline when you dig into it. Dave Andrews, you've got a question. Who wants to help me finish building my workshop? Dave, if we weren't all on lockdown, I'd be happy to come over and help sometime. Mark, right, okay, let's oh gosh, that has dried off nicely. Let's finish this now, shall we? Right, remember, we are buffing, not burnishing. A buff is a polish, a burnish is yes, a buff is a polish, a burnish requires friction and a little bit of heat. We've got a lot of wax on this surface now, and if we get it too hot whilst we're buffing it off, what can happen is it will get hot, say here, really quickly, and then it will melt all the wax around there, and then you're going to end up with a line. So that's obviously something that we don't want to do. So we are going to buff this up, not polish it. Sorry, not burnish it. So I've got a nice thick pad of paper again. And a little bit of pressure, not too much, and then just drag the towel nicely across the surface. Get a little bit more speed into it. So all I want to do is polish, not burnish, and I certainly don't want to be putting in too much pressure. And the piece has actually started to move on the vacuum chuck as well, so I've got to be very careful. And I can put one last coat of wax on there. One last one for luck. Why not? It's only 9:45. Right, one last coat. Just quickly. So although I said earlier that I've put on, in the past, I've put on like 6 coats using the heat method, I wouldn't recommend it. It takes forever, and it's, well, yes, I do recommend it. I do recommend certainly trying it, but for normal sort of everyday stuff, I would just say do it maybe twice, 3 times tops, something like that, because as you've seen, it is quite a long process, but the results are spectacular. There's a little wobble on there now, which means I can't get all of it. Yeah, got a little wobble, never mind. But there we go. That looks rather nice, I'm happy with that. So I'll just take some questions. Could the last polishing be done with buffing wheels? Nicholas Janowski, yes it could. It could indeed be done with buffing wheels. I don't generally use them, mainly because I haven't got any. I just use a buffing wheel on a drill, and I find that works perfectly suitably. You could use a buffing system if you wanted to, but I certainly wouldn't use any of the abrasives on it. Just the actual buffers themselves. Right, there we go. So there's I'll be quite happy to put wax on that all night, just to build it up and build it up and build it up. So let's just give that one last little buff. See, there's just a little bit of pressure there. It's a little bit annoying that there's that wobble on there. But I'll live with it. Ow. Mind your fingers. There, I'm gonna leave it there. I could go all night with that. And where I've got a wobble, it's got some lines on it up here where it's wobbling, so I can't get it all the way round. That's a little bit annoying. Now just take a look at this here, if you can see it through the glare. What you'll find with any wax is if you've got a little inclusion in there, a little bit of a knot, something like that, that's got a little bit of wood missing from it. Where's it gone? What you could do is you could get a toothpick. Or a dentist's pick, something like that if you want. Oh, it's in there. So here's a little bit of here's a dentist pick, and where we've got these little inclusions, you can just flick the wax out, or you could melt it in there if you wanted to. That's quite deep, so I'll melt that in there very carefully, because remember we've got a lot of wax on there already. Just being careful not to set fire to anything. There we go, and that's gotten rid of most of that wax there. Mike Doyle, thank you very much. I'm really pleased you enjoyed it this evening. Thank you for joining us. Thomas Kovalchik. I can't pronounce your surname very well, I'm sorry. Thank you very much indeed to you too. In fact, this is prettier than me. James Cassidy. That's not a question. Thanks, Ray, and thank you, Stephanie, too. So let's just turn this piece round a little bit. You can see all those tiger stripes. Remember all those tens of minutes ago I was telling you about why we colour it all black. That's the reason we turn it all black. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, sorry, I hope you didn't hear that. That was a very big sneeze. Yeah, so by doing it all black first and sanding it off, we can get these tiger stripes going with particularly beautifully figured woods. And with knots like that, it does look like the piece just catches fire. It's just stunning. So I really would recommend you have a go at this. I'm going to take this camera off the tripod a minute and just give you a little bit of a closer look. And that's the overhead camera. So if I just turn that back onto autofocus, and apply. Okay. Well, it's going to be really difficult to show you some of these areas. There we are. So there's the bit that looks like it's on fire, that knot. And if we just have a look a little bit further down here, you can see that it all of it kind of blends in together to look like one big kind of flame coming out of a fire. And round there, here we come into some stripes. And there's that big long line that we saw earlier on. Do you remember that? Way back near the beginning. And as I turn the piece, it actually seems to change colour. That's the joy of figured woods like this. And then we're back round again to something that looks a bit like a phoenix or something like that. Roger Poulton, thank you very much. Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining in this evening. That button there. Right. That, I think, is probably nearly it. So we will... I'll take a few more questions. I'm just going to turn the vacuum chuck off. Just do this. There we go. There's the vacuum chuck. And there's the inside of the bowl, which I haven't finished. Haven't finished yet. I'll do that. I might do this demonstration again and do the inside of this bowl. It is because it is that button. It is absolutely lovely. I think you'll agree. So there it is. Right. A little bit quieter without the compressor going off as well. Convalere, will it work with microcrystalline wax? I was just answering that question to somebody else, and I can't see why it wouldn't work, but I've not actually tried it myself. Microcrystalline wax and carnauba wax have roughly the same melting point, so I can't see why it wouldn't work, to be honest. Chris Cox, thank you. Adrian Moore, what are you going to call the piece? I don't know yet. I'll decide that when I finish, when I do the inside of it. I like to name pieces. It makes me sound like a proper artist. Thank you, Cut, Sand, Wax and Admire. Thank you, Leisure. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Marky, this has been the greatest part of my work day. That's very kind, Marky. Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Cheers, Rich. Right, so if you do have a go at this this technique yourself, let me know how you get on. I'd love to know, and please do share it around on Facebook as well if you have a go at this technique. It's not difficult, particularly if you have faith in what you're doing. Have faith in what you're doing and the technique that I've shown you. And if you're not sure, use these downloads from the website. They're completely free and they can be really valuable in helping you decide what colours to use. You don't have to use the colours that I've used tonight. You can use the wheels to play and experiment. And the great thing about wood turning, of course, is if you don't like it, most of the time you can just cut it off and start again. Experiment with it, play with them, see how you get on, but just have fun with it. And remember, it's your wood and you can do what you like with it and just enjoy yourself. And let's take a couple more questions before we go. Martin, would you do the same to the inside or would you do something different? Good question, Brent. Brent Beecroft. For demonstration purposes, I will do the same. But what I have done in the past, if I can find it, hang on. Please hold. What I have done in the past is something like that, Brent, and just colour the inside with a nice wide rim, something like that. And particularly at demonstrations, if there are turners there who don't like the idea of adding colour, by leaving a little bit of the natural wood, I find it tends to keep them a little bit happier. But I don't always do the inside of a bowl. I don't always colour the inside of a bowl, but when I do, I tend to go sort of all out with it. Right. Thank you very much, Karen. Small bowl over your right shoulder. Small bowl over my right shoulder on the bench. This one. One of these. That one or that one? This is the one I did at the demonstration a couple of weeks ago. That's the one that we burnt, that we scorched right down and then filled with purple embellishing wax that came through on the screens as blue. And this one is a lacquer finish. My lacquer finish, and this has been done with a light blue, purple and yellow. Steve Boz, thank you very much indeed, sir. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Gary Hyde, you're very welcome. James Cassidy, where do I get my large bowl blanks from? I think some of the big ones, James, have come from Styles and Bates or G&S Timber Supplies up north, I think. And occasionally I can get some big ones from Yandles. I just sort of shop around for them. Occasionally they come up on eBay, but I don't normally buy too much off of eBay. So Styles and Bates, I think, do some big stuff, as do G&S Timber Supplies. Gary, thank you. Thomas again, if you use the vacuum chuck to take the foot off, do you need to touch up the finish inside? Yeah, good question, Thomas. Yeah, sometimes you do. I'm not overly keen on taking a tenon off with the vacuum chuck because it can damage the inside, but that may be because I haven't had a massive amount of experience using the vacuum chuck. This is the hold fast vacuum system. Let me show you again. Hold on. Yeah, this is the hold fast vacuum system, which I've got mounted to the back of my lathe down here, or the end of my lathe over here. And put that back on. I'm not overly experienced in using it, so when I'm taking a tenon off or holding anything to it, I might be just I've got to be really careful how I say that. It might be too powerful. I might be using too much vacuum to hold it on. I don't know how to say that without sounding a little bit crude. But sorry. So I'm tired. That's just made me giggle. I might have the vacuum turned up too high. Sorry, Thomas. Right. Okay, let me just scroll back up again. Steve Boz, thank you very much. Thomas, Paul, great. I hope you have a good time trying this out, Paul. Julian, thank you. Oh, Philip Pattinson and his 95-year-old mum. Hi, Phil's mum. I hope you're well. Can you buff in between every layer of melted wax, says James of Wessex Technical? Yes, you can if you want to. I don't find that it makes too much of a difference, but hey, if it works for you, it works for you. Go for it. Julian Clifford, Styles and Bates are brilliant. Yes, they are. Darren Spurgeon, thank you very much indeed. I'm glad I've answered all of your questions. Oh, that's really good to know, Darren. You can now make bowls that you can appreciate. Well done. I'm going to be having a few days off. I say off. I'm having a few days off of the lives. Now I'm back again on Tuesday night, I think it is. And Tuesday night will be... Hang on. Yeah, Tuesday the 7th in the evening, I'll be doing a demonstration purely on the Robert Sorby Pro Edge, how I use it, and the techniques that I use in order to get, let me show you, tools, bowl gouge, there we go. I'll show you how I use the Sorby Pro Edge to get fingernails like this. Oh, hang on a minute, I'm going the wrong way. Turn that off, there we go. So that's Tuesday the 7th, and the stream will start at 7 o'clock as usual, with the demo at 7:30. Yes, whoever was asking about how long this will stay here, this demonstration will stay public for 7 days, and then I will remove it, and then in a month's time I'll put it up on my website, as these lives kind of clog up. I don't want to say clog up, but they add on top of the normal production videos, and I don't want them to be. Anyway, you know what I mean. It will be here for 7 days, and then it will be available on my website in a month's time. Ba, ba, ba. Mike, having a heck of a time trying to get your colours here in the States. Both distributors always out of stock. Mike, Jeff at the Walnut Log has an order somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean at the moment, and in there he has more sample boxes coming over, and if you want to order them from Craig at Woodworld of Texas, you'll need to get onto him, chase him, and ask him to put in an order for them. As for when he's going to place an order, I don't know. What with the current economic climate, I have no idea what's going on, particularly obviously over in the States. But if you ask him, or if any of you guys over in the States, if any of you want the colours, chase Jeff at the Walnut Log to order them in for you, and also chase Craig at Woodworld of Texas. If he gets enough interest and perhaps enough back orders, something like that, he'll put an order in. I'm still able to ship overseas. Currently there are no restrictions on air freight, particularly with FedEx. There is a slight delay of perhaps 1 to 2 days, something like that, but I can get it to the distributors all over the world. Chris Sullivan wants to see the parting tool. Where is it? That one. Chris Sullivan, that's the parting tool I'm using. Okay, right. It's 10 past 10. It really is time for me to sign off for tonight. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody who has joined in this evening. And oh my word, there are loads and loads of super chats. I think a few I might have missed. Ian Bennett, Mike Doyle, Thomas Kovalchik, Roger Poulton, Cut Sand, Wax Admire, Steve Boz, Darren Spurgeon. I really appreciate it. Thank you ever so much. And yeah, everybody, thank you for watching. I hope you found this evening interesting and inspirational, and you may even have a try at something like this yourself. And if you haven't enjoyed or thought colouring was for you, maybe now could be the ideal time to have a go at it. And if you haven't liked people adding colour to their work in the past, maybe tonight I might have helped change your mind a little bit. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Please do stay safe and well. Stay home, stay in, or stay in your workshop. Keep your hands clean, and do stay healthy and safe. And thanks again for watching. Bye for now.